this caliber would be unbeatable. I do not mean that every guerrilla group can have, at its inception, officers of such qualities. The officers must be men naturally and patient. If this is present, the others will develop. If it is not present, nothing can be done. When officers are first selected from a group, it is this quality that should receive particular attention. The officers in a group should be inhabitants of the locality in which the group is organized, as this will facilitate relations between them and the local civilians. In addition, officers so chosen should be familiar with conditions. If an Hey, welcome to Social. Guerrilla army. Since each guerrilla group fights in a protracted war, its officers must be brave and positive men whose entire loyalty is dedicated to the cause of emancipation of the people. An officer should have the following qualities: great powers of endurance, so that in spite of any hardship, he sets an example to his men and is a model for them. He must be able to mix easily with the people. His spirit and that of the men must be one in strengthening the policy of resistance to the Japanese. If he wishes to gain victories, he must study tactics. A guerrilla group with officers of this caliber would be unbeatable. I do not mean that every guerrilla group can have, at its inception, officers of such qualities. The officers must be men naturally endowed with good qualities, which can be developed during the course of campaigning. The most important natural quality is that of complete loyalty to the idea of people's emancipation. If this is present, the others will develop. If it is not present, nothing can be done. When officers are first selected from a group, it is this quality that should receive particular attention. The officers in a group should be inhabitants of the locality in which the group is organized, as this will facilitate relations between them and the local civilians. In addition, officers so chosen should be familiar with conditions. If in any locality there are not enough men of sufficiently high qualifications to become officers, an effort must be made to train and educate the people so these qualities may be developed and the potential officer material increased. There can be no disagreements between officers native to one place and those from other localities. A guerrilla group ought to operate on the principle that only volunteers are acceptable for service. It is a mistake to impress people into service. As long as a person is willing to fight, his social condition or position is no consideration. But only men who are courageous and determined can bear the hardships of guerrilla campaigning in a protracted war. A soldier who habitually breaks regulations must be dismissed from the army. Vagabonds and vicious people must not be accepted for service. The opium habit must be forbidden, and a soldier who cannot break himself of the habit should be dismissed. Victory in guerrilla war is conditioned upon keeping the membership pure and clean. It is a fact that during the war the enemy may take advantage of certain people who are lacking in conscience and patriotism and induce them to join the guerrillas for the purpose of betraying them. Officers must, therefore, continually educate the soldiers and inculcate patriotism in them. This will prevent the success of traitors. The traitors who are in the ranks must be discovered and expelled, and punishment and expulsion meted out to those who have been influenced by them. In all such cases, the officers should summon the soldiers and relate the facts to them, thus arousing their hatred and detestation for traitors. This procedure will serve as well as warning to the other soldiers. If an officer is discovered to be a traitor, some prudence must be used in the punishment adjudged. However, the work of eliminating traitors in the army begins with their elimination from among the people. Chinese soldiers who have served under puppet governments and bandits who have been converted should be welcomed as individuals or as groups. They should be well treated and repatriated. But care should be used during their reorientation to distinguish those whose idea is to fight the Japanese from those who may be present for other reasons.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
How to hide an empire.
Chapter 6. The Political Problems of Guerrilla Warfare. In Chapter 1, I mentioned the fact that guerrilla troops should have a precise conception of the political goal of the struggle and the political organization to be used in attaining that goal. This means that both organization and discipline of guerrilla troops must be at a high level so that they can carry out the political activities that are the life of both the guerrilla armies and of revolutionary warfare. First of all, political activities depend upon the indoctrination of both military and political leaders with the idea of anti-Japanism. Through them, the idea is transmitted to the troops. One must not feel that he is anti-Japanese merely because he is a member of a guerrilla unit. The anti-Japanese idea must be an ever-present conviction, and if it is forgotten, we may succumb to the temptations of the enemy or be overcome with discouragements. In a war of long duration, those whose conviction that the people must be emancipated is not deep-rooted are likely to become shaken in their faith or actually revolt. Without the general education that enables everyone to understand our goal of driving out Japanese imperialism and establishing a free and happy China, the soldiers fight without conviction and lose their determination. The political goal must be clearly and precisely indicated to inhabitants of guerrilla zones and their national consciousness awakened. Hence, a concrete explanation of the political systems used is important not only to guerrilla troops, but to all those who are concerned with the realization of our political goal. The Kuomintang has issued a pamphlet entitled System of National Organization for War, which should be widely distributed throughout guerrilla zones. If we lack national organization, we will lack the essential unity that should exist between the soldiers and the people. A study and comprehension of the political objectives of this war and of the anti-Japanese front is particularly important for officers of guerrilla troops. There are some militarists who say, "We are not interested in politics but only in the profession of arms." It is vital that these simple-minded militarists be made to realize the relationship that exists between politics and military affairs. Military action is a method used to attain a political goal. While military affairs and political affairs are not identical, it is impossible to isolate one from the other. It is to be hoped that the world is in the last era of strife. The vast majority of human beings have already prepared or are preparing to fight a war that will bring justice to the oppressed peoples of the world. No matter how long this war may last, there is no doubt that it will be followed up by an unprecedented epic of peace. The war that we are fighting today for the emancipation of the Chinese is a part of the war for the freedom of all human beings, and the independent, happy, and liberal China that we are fighting to establish will be a part of that new world order. A conception like this is difficult for the simple-minded militarist to grasp, and it must therefore be carefully explained to him. There are three additional matters that must be considered under the broad question of political activities. These are political activities, first, as applied to the troops, second, as applied to the people, and third, as applied to the enemy. The fundamental problems are, first, spiritual unification of officers and men within the army, second, spiritual unification of the army and the people, and last, destruction of the unity of the enemy. The concrete methods for achieving these unities are discussed in detail in pamphlet number 4 of this series, entitled political activities, and anti-Japanese guerrilla warfare. A revolutionary army must have discipline that is established on a limited democratic basis. In all armies, obedience of the subordinates to their superiors must be exacted. This is true in the case of guerrilla discipline, but the basis for guerrilla discipline must be the individual conscience. With guerrillas, a discipline of compulsion is ineffective. In any revolutionary army, there is unity of purpose as far as both officers and men are concerned, and, therefore, within such an army, discipline is self-imposed. Although discipline in guerrilla ranks is not as severe as in the ranks of orthodox forces, the necessity for discipline exists. This must be self-imposed because only when it is the soldier able to understand completely why he fights and why he must obey. This type of discipline becomes a tower of strength within the army, and it is the only type that can truly harmonize the relationship that exists between officers and soldiers. In any system where discipline is externally imposed, the relationship that exists between officer and man is characterized by indifference of the one to the other. The idea that officers can physically beat or severely tongue-lash their men is a futile one and is not in accord with the conception of self-imposed discipline. Discipline of the futile type will destroy internal unity and fighting strength. A discipline self-imposed is the primary characteristic of a democratic system in the army. A secondary characteristic is found in the degree of liberties accorded officers and soldiers. In a revolutionary army, all individuals enjoy political liberty, and the question, for example, of the emancipation of the people must not only be tolerated but discussed, and propaganda must be encouraged. Further, in such an army, the mode of living of the officers and the soldiers must not differ too much, and this is particularly true in the case of guerrilla troops. Officers should live under the same conditions as their men, for that is the only way in which they can gain from their men the admiration and confidence so vital in war. It is incorrect to hold to a theory of equality in all things, but there must be equality of existence in accepting the hardships and dangers of war. Thus we may attain to the unification of the officer and soldier groups, a unity both horizontal within the group itself and vertical, that is, from lower to higher echelons. It is only when such unity is present that units can be said to be powerful combat factors. There is also a unity of spirit that should exist between troops and local inhabitants. The 8th Root Army put into practice a code known as the 3 Rules and the 8 Remarks, which we list here. Rules. 1. All actions are subject to command. 2. Do not steal from the people. 3. Be neither selfish nor unjust. Remarks. 1. Replace the door when you leave the house. 2. Roll up the bedding on which you have slept. 3. Be courteous. 4. Be honest in your transactions. 5. Return what you borrow. 6. Replace what you break. 7. Do not bathe in the presence of women. 8. Do not without authority search the pocketbooks of those you arrest. The Red Army adhered to this code for 10 years, and the 8th Root Army and other units have since adopted it. Many people think it impossible for guerrillas to exist for long in the enemy's rear. Such a belief reveals lack of comprehension of the relationship that should exist between the people and the troops. The former may be likened to water and the latter to the fish who inhabit it. How may it be said that these two cannot exist together? It is only undisciplined troops who make the people their enemies, and who, like the fish out of his native element, cannot live. We further our mission of destroying the enemy by propagandizing his troops, by treating his captured soldiers with consideration, and by caring for those of his wounded who fall into our hands. If we fail in these respects, we strengthen the solidarity of our enemy. Chapter 7. The Strategy of Guerrilla Resistance Against Japan. It has been definitely decided that in the strategy of our war against Japan, guerrilla strategy must be auxiliary to fundamental orthodox methods. If this were a small country, guerrilla activities could be carried out close to the scene of operations of the regular army and directly complementary to them. In such a case, there would be no question of guerrilla strategy as such, nor would the question arise if our country were as strong as Russia, for example, and able speedily to eject an invader. The question exists because China, a weak country of vast size, has today progressed to the point where it has become possible to adopt the policy of a protracted war characterized by guerrilla operations. Although these may at first glance seem to be abnormal or heterodox, such is not actually the case. Because Japanese military power is inadequate, much of the territory her armies have overrun is without sufficient garrison troops. Under these circumstances, the primary functions of guerrillas are three. First, to conduct a war on exterior lines, that is, in the rear of the enemy. Second, to establish bases. And last, to extend the war areas. Thus, guerrilla participation in the war is not merely a matter of purely local guerrilla tactics, but involves strategical considerations. Such war, with its vast time and space factors, establishes a new military process, the focal point of which is China today. The Japanese are apparently attempting to recall a past that saw the Yuan extinguish the Sung and the Qing conquer the Ming, that witnessed the extension of the British Empire to North America and India, that saw the Latins overrun Central and South America. As far as China today is concerned, such dreams of conquest are fantastic and without reality. Today's China is better equipped than was the China of yesterday, and a new type of guerrilla hostilities is a part of that equipment. If our enemy fails to take these facts into consideration and makes too optimistic an estimate of the situation, he courts disaster. Though the strategy of guerrillas is inseparable from war strategy as a whole, the actual conduct of these hostilities differs from the conduct of orthodox operations. Each type of warfare has methods peculiar to itself, and methods suitable to regular warfare cannot be applied with success to the special situations that confront guerrillas. Before we treat the practical aspects of guerrilla war, it might be well to recall the fundamental axiom of combat on which all military action is based. This can be stated: conservation of one's own strength, destruction of enemy strength. A military policy based on this axiom is consonant with a national policy directed towards the building of a free and prosperous Chinese state and the destruction of Japanese imperialism. It is in furtherance of this policy that government applies its military strength. Is the sacrifice demanded by war and conflict with the idea of self-preservation? Not at all. The sacrifices demanded are necessary both to destroy the enemy and to preserve ourselves. The sacrifice of a part of the people is necessary to preserve the whole. All the considerations of military action are derived from this axiom. Its application is as apparent in all tactical and strategical conceptions as it is in the simple case of the soldier who shoots at his enemy from a covered position. All guerrilla units start from nothing and grow. What methods should we select to ensure the conservation and development of our own strength and the destruction of that of the enemy? The essential requirements are the 6 listed below. 1. Retention of the initiative, alertness, carefully planned tactical attacks in a war of strategical defense, tactical speed in a war strategically protracted, tactical operations on exterior lines in a war conducted strategically on interior lines. 2. Conduct of operations to complement those of the regular army. 3. The establishment of bases. 4. A clear understanding of the relationship that exists between the attack and the defense. 5. The development of mobile operations. 6. Correct command. The enemy, though numerically weak, is strong in the quality of his troops and their equipment. We, on the other hand, are strong numerically but weak as to quality. These considerations have been taken into account in the development of the policy of tactical offense, tactical speed, and tactical operations on exterior lines in a war that, strategically speaking, is defensive in character, protracted in nature, and conducted along interior lines. Our strategy is based on these conceptions. They must be kept in mind in the conduct of all operations. Although the element of surprise is not absent in orthodox warfare, there are fewer opportunities to apply it than there are during guerrilla hostilities. In the latter, speed is essential. The movements of guerrilla troops must be secret and of supernatural rapidity. The enemy must be taken unaware and the action entered speedily. There can be no procrastination in the execution of plans, no assumption of a negative or passive defense, no great dispersion of forces in many local engagements. The basic method is the attack in a violent and deceptive form. While there may be cases where the attack will extend over a period of several days, if that length of time is necessary to annihilate an enemy group, it is more profitable to launch and push an attack with maximum speed. The tactics of defense have no place in the realm of guerrilla warfare. If a delaying action is necessary, such places as defiles, river crossings, and villages offer the most suitable conditions, for it is in such places that the enemy's arrangements may be disrupted and he may be annihilated. The enemy is much stronger than we are, and it is true that we can hinder, distract, disperse, and destroy him only if we disperse our own forces. Although guerrilla warfare is the warfare of such dispersed units, it is sometimes desirable to concentrate in order to destroy an enemy. Thus, the principle of concentration of force against a relatively weaker enemy is applicable to guerrilla warfare. We can prolong this struggle and make of it a protracted war only by gaining positive and lightning-like tactical decisions, by employing our manpower in proper concentrations and dispersions, and by operating on exterior lines in order to surround and destroy our enemy. If we cannot surround whole armies, we can at least partially destroy them. If we cannot kill the Japanese, we can capture them. The total effect of many local successes will be to change the relative strengths of the opposing forces. The destruction of Japan's military power, combined with the international sympathy for China's cause and the revolutionary tendencies evident in Japan, will be sufficient to destroy Japanese imperialism. We will next discuss initiative, alertness, and the matter of careful planning. What is meant by initiative in warfare? In all battles and wars, a struggle to gain and retain the initiative goes on between the opposing sides, for it is the side that holds the initiative that has liberty of action. When an army loses the initiative, it loses its liberty. Its role becomes passive. It faces the danger of defeat and destruction. It is more difficult to obtain the initiative when defending on interior lines than it is while attacking on exterior lines. This is what Japan is doing. There are, however, several weak points as far as Japan is concerned. One of these is lack of sufficient manpower for the task. Another is her cruelty to the inhabitants of conquered areas. A third is the underestimation of Chinese strength, which has resulted in the differences between military cliques which, in turn, have been productive of many mistakes in the direction of her military forces. For instance, she has been gradually compelled to increase her manpower in China while, at the same time, the many arguments over plans of operations and disposition of troops have resulted in the loss of good opportunities for improvement of her strategical position. This explains the fact that although the Japanese are frequently able to surround large bodies of Chinese troops, they have never been able to capture more than a few. The Japanese military machine is thus being weakened by insufficiency of manpower, inadequacy of resources, the barbarism of her troops, and the general stupidity that has characterized the conduct of operations. Her offensive continues unabated, but because of the weaknesses pointed out, her attack must be limited in extent. She can never conquer China. The day will come, indeed, already has in some areas, when she will be forced into a passive role. When hostilities commenced, China was passive, but as we enter the second phase of the war, we find ourselves pursuing a strategy of mobile warfare. with both guerrillas and regulars operating on exterior lines. Thus, with each passing day, we seize some degree of initiative from the Japanese. The matter of initiative is especially serious for guerrilla forces, who must face critical situations unknown to regular troops. The superiority of the enemy and the lack of unity and experience within our own ranks may be cited. Guerrillas can, however, gain the initiative if they keep in mind the weak points of the enemy. Because of the enemy's insufficient manpower, guerrillas can operate over vast territories. Because he is a foreigner and a barbarian, guerrillas can gain the confidence of millions of their countrymen. Because of the stupidity of enemy commanders, guerrillas can make full use of their own cleverness. Both guerrillas and regulars must exploit these enemy weaknesses while, at the same time, our own are remedied. Some of our weaknesses are apparent only and are, in actuality, sources of strength. For example, the very fact that most guerrilla groups are small makes it desirable and advantageous for them to appear and disappear in the enemy's rear. With such activities, the enemy is simply unable to cope. A similar liberty of action can rarely be obtained by orthodox forces. When the enemy attacks the guerrillas with more than one column, it is difficult for the latter to retain the initiative. Any error, no matter how slight, in the estimation of the situation is likely to result in forcing the guerrillas into a passive role. They will then find themselves unable to beat off the attacks of the enemy. It is apparent that we can gain and retain the initiative only by a correct estimation of the situation and a proper arrangement of all military and political factors. A too pessimistic estimate will operate to force us into a passive position, with consequent loss of initiative. An overly optimistic estimate, with its rash ordering of factors, will produce the same result. No military leader is endowed by heaven with an ability to seize the initiative. It is the intelligent leader who does so after a careful study and estimate of the situation and arrangement of the military and political factors involved. When a guerrilla unit, through either a poor estimate on the part of its leader or pressure from the enemy, is forced into a passive position, its first duty is to extricate itself. No method can be prescribed for this, as the method to be employed will, in every case, depend on the situation. One can, if necessary, run away, but there are times when the situation seems hopeless and, in reality, is not so at all. It is at such times that the good leader recognizes and seizes the moment when he can regain the lost initiative. Let us revert to alertness. To conduct one's troops with alertness is an essential of guerrilla command. Leaders must realize that to operate alertly is the most important factor in gaining the initiative and vital in its effect on the relative situation that exists between our forces and those of the enemy. Guerrilla commanders adjust their operations to the enemy situation, to the terrain, and to prevailing local conditions. Leaders must be alert to sense changes in these factors and make necessary modifications in troop dispositions to accord with them. The leader must be like the fisherman who, with his nets, is able both to cast them and to pull them out in awareness of the depth of the water, the strength of the current, or the presence of any obstructions that may foul them. As the fisherman controls his nets through the lead ropes, so the guerrilla leader maintains contact with and control over his units. As the fisherman must change his position, so must the guerrilla commander. Dispersion, concentration, constant change of position. It is in these ways that guerrillas employ their strength. In general, guerrilla units disperse to operate. 1. When the enemy is in overextended defense and sufficient force cannot be concentrated against him, guerrillas must disperse, harass him, and demoralize him. 2. When encircled by the enemy, guerrillas disperse to withdraw. 3. When the nature of the ground limits action, guerrillas disperse. 4. When the availability of supplies limits action, they disperse. 5. Guerrillas disperse in order to promote mass movements over a wide area. Regardless of the circumstances that prevail at the time of dispersal, caution must be exercised in certain matters. 1. A relatively large group should be retained as a central force. The remainder of the troops should not be divided into groups of absolutely equal size. In this way, the leader is in a position to deal with any circumstances that may arise. 2. Each dispersed unit should have clear and definite responsibilities. Orders should specify a place to which to proceed, the time of proceeding, and the place, time, and method of assembly. Guerrillas concentrate when the enemy is advancing upon them, and there is opportunity to fall upon him and destroy him. Concentration may be desirable when the enemy is on the defensive and guerrillas wish to destroy isolated detachments in particular localities. By the term concentrate, we do not mean the assembly of all manpower, but rather of only that necessary for the task. The remaining guerrillas are assigned missions of hindering and delaying the enemy, of destroying isolated groups, or of conducting mass propaganda. In addition to the dispersion and concentration of forces, the leader must understand what is termed alert shifting. When the enemy feels the danger of guerrillas, he will generally send troops out to attack them. The guerrillas must consider the situation and decide at what time and at what place they wish to fight. If they find that they cannot fight, they must immediately shift. Then the enemy may be destroyed piecemeal. For example, after a guerrilla group has destroyed an enemy detachment at one place, it may be shifted to another area to attack and destroy a second detachment. Sometimes it will not be profitable for a unit to become engaged in a certain area, and in that case, it must move immediately. When the situation is serious, the guerrillas must move with the fluidity of water and the ease of the blowing wind. Their tactics must deceive, tempt, and confuse the enemy. They must lead the enemy to believe that they will attack him from the east and north, and they must then strike him from the west and the south. They must strike, then rapidly disperse. They must move at night. Guerrilla initiative is expressed in dispersion, concentration, and the alert shifting of forces. If guerrillas are stupid and obstinate, they will be led to passive positions and severely damaged. Skill in conducting guerrilla operations, however, lies not in merely understanding the things we have discussed, but rather in their actual application on the field of battle. The quick intelligence that constantly watches the ever-changing situation and is able to seize on the right moment for decisive action is found only in keen and thoughtful observers. Careful planning is necessary if victory is to be won in guerrilla war, and those who fight without method do not understand the nature of guerrilla action. A plan is necessary regardless of the size of the unit involved. A prudent plan is as necessary in the case of the squad as in the case of the regiment. The situation must be carefully studied, then an assignment of duties made. Plans must include both political and military instruction, the matter of supply and equipment, and the matter of cooperation with local civilians. Without study of these factors, it is impossible either to seize the initiative or to operate alertly. It is true that guerrillas can make only limited plans, but even so, the factors we have mentioned must be considered. The initiative can be secured and retained only following a positive victory that results from attack. The attack must be made on guerrilla initiative, that is, guerrillas must not permit themselves to be maneuvered into a position where they are robbed of initiative and where the decision to attack is forced upon them. Any victory will result from careful planning and alert control. Even in defense, all our efforts must be directed toward a resumption of the attack, for it is only by attack that we can extinguish our enemies and preserve ourselves. A defensive or a withdrawal is entirely useless as far as extinguishing our enemies is concerned, and of only temporary value as far as the conservation of our forces is concerned. This principle is valid both for guerrillas and regular troops. The differences are of degree only, that is to say, in the manner of execution. The relationship that exists between guerrillas and the orthodox forces is important and must be appreciated. Generally speaking, there are three types of cooperation between guerrillas and orthodox groups. These are 1. Strategical cooperation, 2. Tactical cooperation, 3. Battle cooperation. Guerrillas who harass the enemy's rear installations and hinder his transport are weakening him and encouraging the national spirit of resistance. They are cooperating strategically. For example, the guerrillas in Manchuria had no functions of strategical cooperation with Orthodox forces until the war in China started. Since that time, their function of strategical cooperation is evident, for if they can kill one enemy, make the enemy expend one round of ammunition, or hinder one enemy group in its advance southward, our powers of resistance here are proportionally increased. Such guerrilla action has a positive action on the enemy nation and on its troops, while, at the same time, it encourages our own countrymen. Another example of strategical cooperation is furnished by the guerrillas who operate along the Pingsu, Pinghang, Xinpu, Tungpu, and Shangtai railways. This cooperation began when the invader attacked, continued during the period when he held garrisoned cities in the areas, and was intensified when our regular forces counterattacked in an effort to restore the lost territories. As an example of tactical cooperation, we may cite the operations at Sengku, where guerrillas both north and south of Yemen destroyed the Tungpu Railway and the motor roads near Ping Sing Pass and Yangfengku. A number of small operating bases were established, and organized guerrilla action in Shanxi complemented the activities of the regular forces both there and in the defense of Honan. Similarly, during the South Shantung campaign, guerrillas in the 5 northern provinces cooperated with the Army's operation on the Shuchao front. Guerrilla commanders in rear areas and those in command of regiments assigned to operate with Orthodox units must cooperate in accordance with the situation. It is their function to determine weak points in the enemy dispositions, to harass them, to disrupt their transport, and to undermine their morale. If guerrilla action were independent, the results to be obtained from tactical cooperation would be lost, and those that result from strategical cooperation greatly diminished. In order to accomplish their mission and improve the degree of cooperation, guerrilla units must be equipped with some means of rapid communication. For this purpose, two-way radio sets are recommended. Guerrilla forces in the immediate battle area are responsible for close cooperation with regular forces. Their principal functions are to hinder enemy transport, to gather information, and to act as outposts and sentinels. Even without precise instructions from the commander of the regular forces, these missions, as well as any others that contribute to the general success, should be assumed. The problem of establishment of bases is of particular importance. This is so because this war is a cruel and protracted struggle. The lost territories can be restored only by a strategical counterattack, and this we cannot carry out until the enemy is well into China. Consequently, some part of our country, or indeed most of it, may be captured by the enemy and become his rear area. It is our task to develop intensive guerrilla warfare over this vast area and convert the enemy's rear into an additional front. Thus, the enemy will never be able to stop fighting. In order to subdue the occupied territory, the enemy will have to become increasingly severe and oppressive. A guerrilla base may be defined as an area strategically located in which the guerrillas can carry out their duties of training, self-preservation, and development. Ability to fight a war without a rear area is a fundamental characteristic of guerrilla action. But this does not mean that guerrillas can exist and function over a long period of time without the development of base areas. History shows us many examples of peasant revolts that were unsuccessful, and it is fanciful to believe that such movements, characterized by banditry and brigandage, could succeed in this area of improved communications and military equipment. Some guerrilla leaders seem to think that those qualities are present in today's movement, and before such leaders can comprehend the importance of base areas in the long-term war, Their minds must be disabused of this idea. The subject of bases may be better understood if we consider 1. The various categories of bases, 2. Guerrilla areas and base areas, 3. The establishment of bases, 4. The development of bases. Guerrilla bases may be classified according to their location as first, mountain bases, second, plains bases, and last, river, lake, and bay bases. The advantage of bases in mountain areas are evident. Those which are now established are at Shangpao-Chen, Wu-Tai-Shan, Taiheng-Shan, Taishan, Yanshan, and Maoshan. These bases are strongly protected. Similar bases should be established in all enemy rear areas. Plains country is generally not satisfactory for guerrilla operating bases, but this does not mean that guerrilla warfare cannot flourish in such country or that bases cannot be established there. The extent of guerrilla development in Hopei and West Shantung proves the opposite to be the case. Whether we can count on the use of these bases over long periods of time is questionable. We can, however, establish small bases of a seasonal or temporary nature. This we can do because our barbaric enemy simply does not have the manpower to occupy all the areas he has overrun, and because the population of China is so numerous that a base can be established anywhere. Seasonal bases in plains country may be established in the winter when the rivers are frozen over and in the summer when the crops are growing. Temporary bases may be established when the enemy is otherwise occupied. When the enemy advances, the guerrillas who have established bases in the plains area are the first to engage him. Upon their withdrawal into mountainous country, they should leave behind them guerrilla troops dispersed over the entire area. Guerrillas shift from base to base on the theory that they must be one place one day and another place the next. There are many historical examples of the establishment of bases in river, bay, and lake country, and this is one aspect of our activity that has so far received little attention. Red guerrillas held out for many years in the Hongxi Lake region. We should establish bases in the Hongxi and Tai areas and along rivers and watercourses in territory controlled by the enemy so as to deny him access to and free use of the water routes. There is a difference between the terms base area and guerrilla area. An area completely surrounded by territory occupied by the enemy is a base area. Wu Tai-Shan, Taishan, and Taiheng-Shan are examples of base areas. On the other hand, the area east and north of Wu Tai-Shan, the Shanxi-Hopi-Shahar border zone, is a guerrilla area. Such areas can be controlled by guerrillas only while they actually physically occupy them. Upon their departure, control reverts to a puppet pro-Japanese government. East Hopei, for example, was at first a guerrilla area rather than a base area. A puppet government functioned there. Eventually, the people organized and inspired by guerrillas from the Wu Tai Mountains assisted in the transformation of this guerrilla area into a real base area. Such a task is extremely difficult, for it is largely dependent upon the degree to which the people can be inspired. In certain garrison areas, such as the cities and zones contiguous to the railroads, the guerrillas are unable to drive the Japanese and puppets out. These areas remain guerrilla areas. At other times, base areas might become guerrilla areas due either to our own mistakes or to the activities of the enemy. Obviously, in any given area in the war zone, any one of three situations may develop. The area may remain in Chinese hands, or it may be lost to the Japanese and puppets, or it may be divided between the combatants. Guerrilla leaders should endeavor to see that either the first or the last of these situations is assured. Another point essential in the establishment of bases is the cooperation that must exist between the armed guerrilla bands and the people. All our strength must be used to spread the doctrine of armed resistance to Japan, to arm the people, to organize self-defense units, and to train guerrilla bands. This doctrine must be spread among the people, who must be organized into anti-Japanese groups. Their political instincts must be sharpened and their martial ardor increased. If the workers, the farmers, the lovers of liberty, the young men, the women, and the children are not organized, they will never realize their own anti-Japanese power. Only the united strength of the people can eliminate traitors, recover the measure of political power that has been lost, and conserve and improve what we still retain. We have already touched on geographic factors in our discussion of bases, and we must also mention the economic aspects of the problem. What economic policy should be adopted? Any such policy must offer reasonable protection to commerce and business. We interpret reasonable protection to mean that people must contribute money in proportion to the money they have. Farmers will be required to furnish a certain share of their crops to guerrilla troops. Confiscation, except in the case of businesses run by traders, is prohibited. Our activities must be extended over the entire periphery of the base area if we wish to attack the enemy's bases and thus strengthen and develop our own. This will afford us opportunity to organize, equip, and train the people, thus furthering guerrilla policy as well as the national policy of protracted war. At times, we must emphasize the development and extension of base areas, at other times, the organization, training, or equipment of the people. Each guerrilla base will have its own peculiar problems of attack and defense. In general, the enemy, in an endeavor to consolidate his gains, will attempt to extinguish guerrilla bases by dispatching numerous bodies of troops over a number of different routes. This must be anticipated and the encirclement broken by counterattack. As such enemy columns are without reserves, we should plan on using our main forces to attack one of them by surprise and devote our secondary effort to continual hindrance and harassment. At the same time, other forces should isolate enemy garrison troops and operate on their lines of supply and communication. When one column has been disposed of, we may turn our attention to one of the others. In a base area as large as Wu Taishan, for example, there are 4 or 5 military subdivisions. Guerrillas in these subdivisions must cooperate to form a primary force to counterattack the enemy or the area from which he came, while a secondary force harasses and hinders him. After defeating the enemy in any area, we must take advantage of the period he requires for reorganization to press home our attacks. We must not attack an objective we are not certain of winning. We must confine our operations to relatively small areas and destroy the enemy and traitors in those places. When the inhabitants have been inspired, new volunteers accepted, trained, equipped, and organized, our operations may be extended to include cities and lines of communication not strongly held. We may hold these at least for temporary, if not for permanent periods. All these are our duties in offensive strategy. Their object is to lengthen the period that the enemy must remain on the defensive. Then our military activities and our organization work among the masses of the people must be zealously expanded, and with equal zeal, the strength of the enemy attacked and diminished. It is of great importance that guerrilla units be rested and instructed. During such times as the enemy is on the defensive, the troops may get some rest and instruction may be carried out. The development of mobile warfare is not only possible but essential. This is the case because our current war is a desperate and protracted struggle. If China were able to conquer the Japanese bandits speedily and to recover her lost territories, there would be no question of long-term war on a national scale. Hence, there would be no question of the relation of guerrilla warfare and the war of movement. Exactly the opposite is actually the case. In order to ensure the development of guerrilla hostilities into mobile warfare of an orthodox nature, both the quantity and quality of guerrilla troops must be improved. Primarily, more men must join the armies, then the quality of equipment and standards of training must be improved. Political training must be emphasized, and our organization, the technique of handling our weapons, our tactics, all must be improved. Our internal discipline must be strengthened. The soldiers must be educated politically. There must be a gradual change from guerrilla formations to orthodox regimental organization. The necessary bureaus and staffs, both political and military, must be provided. At the same time, attention must be paid to the creation of suitable supply, medical, and hygiene units. The standards of equipment must be raised and types of weapons increased. Communication equipment must not be forgotten. Orthodox standards of discipline must be established. Because guerrilla formations act independently, and because they are the most elementary of armed formations, command cannot be too highly centralized. If it were, guerrilla action would be too limited in scope. At the same time, guerrilla activities, to be most effective, must be coordinated, not only insofar as they themselves are concerned, but additionally with regular troops operating in the same areas. This coordination is a function of the war zone commander and his staff. In guerrilla base areas, the command must be centralized for strategical purposes and decentralized for tactical purposes. Centralized strategical command takes care of the general management of all guerrilla units, their coordination within war zones, and the general policy regarding guerrilla base areas. Beyond this, centralization of command will result in interference with subordinate units, as, naturally, the tactics to apply to concrete situations can be determined only as these various situations arise. This is true in orthodox warfare when communications between lower and higher echelons break down. In a word, proper guerrilla policy will provide for unified strategy and independent activity. Each guerrilla area is divided into districts, and these in turn are divided into sub-districts. Each subdivision has its appointed commander, and while general plans are made by higher commanders, the nature of actions is determined by inferior commanders. The former may suggest the nature of the action to be taken, but cannot define it. Thus, inferior groups have more or less complete local control. Appendix. Notes. 1. Each squad consists of from 9 to 11 men. In case men or arms are not sufficient, the 3rd platoon may be dispensed with or one squad organized as company headquarters. 2. The mobile propaganda unit consists of members of the company who are not relieved of primary duties except to carry out propaganda when they are not fighting. 3. If there is insufficient personnel, the medical section is not separately organized. If there are only 2 or 3 medical personnel, they may be attached to the administrative section. 4. If there is no barber, it is unimportant. If there is an insufficient number of cooks, any member of the company may be designated to prepare food. 5. Each combatant soldier should be armed with the rifle. If there are not enough rifles, each squad should have 2 or 3. Shotguns, lances, and big swords can also be furnished. The distribution of rifles does not have to be equalized in platoons. As different missions are assigned to platoons, it may be necessary to give one platoon more rifles than the others. 6. The strength of a company should at the most be 180, divided into 12 squads of 11 men each. The minimum strength of a company should be 82 men, divided into 6 squads of 9 men each.
Anchor book, The Better Angels of Our Nature, A History of Violence.
upsurge in China's countryside. December 27th, 1955. Quote, "We should always use our brains and think everything over carefully. A common saying goes, knit your brows and you will hit upon a stratagem. In other words, much thinking yields wisdom. In order to get rid of the blindness which exists to a serious extent in our party, we must encourage our comrades to think, to learn the method of analysis, and to cultivate the habit of analysis." End quote. Our study in the current situation, April 12th, 1944. Quote, "If in any process there are a number of contradictions, one of them must be the principal contradiction playing the leading and decisive role, while the rest occupy a secondary and subordinate position. Therefore, in studying any complex process in which there are two or more contradictions, we must devote every effort to finding its principal contradiction. Once this principal contradiction is grasped, all problems can be readily solved." End quote. On contradiction, August 1937. Quote, "Of the two contradictory aspects, one must be principal and the other secondary. The principal aspect is the one playing the leading role in the contradiction. The nature of a thing is determined mainly by the principal aspect of a contradiction, the aspect which has gained the dominant position. But this situation is not static. The principal and the non-principal aspects of a contradiction transform themselves into each other, and the nature of the thing changes accordingly. It is not enough to set tasks. We must also solve the problem of the methods for carrying them out. If our task is to cross a river, we cannot cross it without a bridge or a boat, unless the bridge or boat problem is solved. It is idle to speak of crossing the river. Unless the problem of method is solved, talk about the task is useless." End quote. Be concerned with the well-being of the masses. Pay attention to methods of work. January 27th, 1934. Quote, "In any task, if no general and widespread call is issued, the broad masses cannot be mobilized for action. But if persons in leading positions confine themselves to a general call, if they do not personally, in some of the organizations, go deeply and concrete into the work called for, make a breakthrough at some single point, gain experience and use this experience for guiding other units, then they will have no way of testing the correctness or of enriching the content of their general call. And there is the danger that nothing may come of it." End quote. Some questions concerning methods of leadership. June 1st, 1943. Quote, "No one in a leading position is competent to give general guidance to all the units unless he derives concrete experience from particular individuals and events in particular subordinate units. This method must be promoted everywhere so that leading cadres at all levels learn to apply it. In any given place, there cannot be a number of central tasks at the same time. At any one time, there could only be one central task, supplemented by other tasks of a second or third order of importance. Consequently, the person with overall responsibility in the locality must take into account the history and circumstances of the struggle there and put the different tasks in their proper order. He should not act upon each instruction as it comes from the higher organization without any planning of his own, and thereby create a multitude of central tasks in a state of confusion and disorder. Nor should a higher organization simultaneously assign many tasks to a lower organization without indicating their relative importance and urgency, or without specifying which is central, for that will lead to confusion in the steps to be taken by the lower organizations in their work, and thus no definite results will be achieved. It is part of the art of leadership to take the whole situation into account and plan accordingly in the light of the historical conditions and existing circumstances of each locality. Decide correctly on the center of gravity and the sequence of the work for each period. Steadfastly carry through the decision and make sure that definite results are achieved. It, a regional or sub-regional bureau of the Central Committee of the party, should constantly have a grip on the progress of the work, exchange experience, and correct mistakes. It should not wait several months, half a year, or a year before holding summing up meetings for a general checkup and a general correction of mistakes. Waiting leads to great loss, while correcting mistakes as soon as they occur reduces loss." End quote. On the policy concerning industry and commerce, February 27th, 1948. Quote, Don't wait until problems pile up and cause a lot of trouble before trying to solve them. Leaders must march ahead of the movement, not lag behind it. End quote. Introductory note to Contract on a Seasonal Basis, 1955. Quote, what we need is an enthusiastic but calm state of mind, and intense but orderly work. End quote. Problems of Strategy in China's Revolutionary War, December 1936. Chapter 23. Investigation and Study. Quote, everyone engaged in practical work must investigate conditions at the lower levels. Such investigation is especially necessary for those who know theory but do not know the actual conditions, for otherwise they will not be able to link theory with practice. Although my assertion, no investigation, no right to speak, has been ridiculed as narrow empiricism, to this day I do not regret having made it. Far from regretting it, I still insist that without investigation there cannot possibly be any right to speak. There are many people who, the moment they alight from the official carriage, make a hullabaloo, spout opinions, criticize this, and condemn that. But, in fact, 10 out of 10 of them will meet with failure. For such views or criticisms, which are not based on thorough investigation, are nothing but ignorant twaddle. Countless times our party suffered at the hands of these imperial envoys, who rushed here, there, and everywhere. Stalin rightly says that theory becomes purposeless if it is not connected with revolutionary practice. And he rightly adds that practice gropes in the dark if its path is not illumined by revolutionary theory. Nobody should be labeled as narrow empiricists, except the practical man who gropes in the dark and lacks perspective and foresight. End quote. Preface and postscript to Rural Surveys, March and April 1941. Quote, to take such an attitude is to seek truth from facts. Facts are all the things that exist objectively. Truth means their internal relations, that is, the laws governing them, and to seek means to study. We should proceed from the actual conditions inside and outside the country, the province, county, or district, and derive from them, as our guide to action, laws which are inherent in them and not imaginary. That is, we should find the internal relations of the events occurring around us. And in order to do that, we must rely not on subjective imagination, not on momentary enthusiasm, not on lifeless books, but on facts that exist objectively. We must appropriate the material in detail, and, guided by the general principles of Marxism-Leninism, draw correct conclusions from it. End quote. Reform Our Study, May 1941. Quote, to behave like a blindfolded man catching sparrows, or a blind man groping for fish, to be crude and careless, to indulge in verbiage, to rest content with a smattering of knowledge. Such is the extremely bad style of work that still exists among many comrades in our party. A style utterly opposed to the fundamental spirit of Marxism-Leninism. Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Stalin have taught us that it is necessary to study conditions conscientiously and to proceed from objective reality and not from subjective wishes. But many of our comrades act in direct violation of this truth. You can't solve a problem? Well, get down and investigate the present facts and its past history. When you have investigated the problem thoroughly, you will know how to solve it. Conclusions invariably come after investigation, and not before. Only a blockhead cudgels his brain on his own, or together with a group, to find a solution or evolve an idea without making any investigation. It must be stressed that this cannot possibly lead to any effective solution or any good idea. End quote. Oppose book worship, May 1930. Quote, investigation may be likened to the long months of pregnancy in solving a problem to the day of birth. To investigate a problem is, indeed, to solve it. With the Marxist-Leninist attitude, a person applies the theory and method of Marxism-Leninism to the systematic and thorough investigation and study of the environment. He does not work by enthusiasm alone, but, as Stalin says, combines revolutionary sweep with practicalness. End quote. Reform Our Study, May 1941. Quote, the only way to know conditions is to make social investigations, to investigate the conditions of each social class in real life. For those charged with directing work, the basic method for knowing conditions is to concentrate on a few cities and villages according to a plan and, using the fundamental viewpoint of Marxism, i.e. the method of class analysis, make a number of thorough investigations. End quote. Preface and postscript to Rural Surveys, March and April 1941. Quote, a fact-finding meeting need not be large. From 3 to 5 or 7 or 8 people are enough. Ample time must be allowed and an outline for the investigation must be prepared. Furthermore, one must personally ask questions, take notes, and have discussions with those at the meeting. Therefore, one certainly cannot make an investigation, or do it well, without zeal, a determination to direct one's eyes downward, and a thirst for knowledge, and without shedding the ugly mantle of pretentiousness, and becoming a willing pupil. A commander's correct dispositions stem from his correct decisions. His correct decisions stem from his correct judgments, and his correct judgments stem from a thorough and necessary reconnaissance and from pondering on and piecing together the data of various kinds gathered through reconnaissance. He applies all possible and necessary methods of reconnaissance and ponders on the information gathered about the enemy's situation, discarding the dross and selecting the essential, eliminating the false and retaining the true, proceeding from the one to the other and from the outside to the inside. Then, he takes the conditions on his own side into account and makes a study of both sides and their interrelations, thereby forming his judgments, making up his mind and working out his plans. Such is the complete process of knowing a situation which a military man goes through before he formulates a strategic plan, a campaign plan, or a battle plan. End quote. Problems of Strategy in China's Revolutionary War, December 1936. Chapter 24, Ideological Self-Cultivation. Quote, even if we achieve gigantic successes in our work, there is no reason whatsoever to feel conceited and arrogant. Modesty helps one to go forward, whereas conceit makes one lag behind. This is a truth we must always bear in mind. End quote. Opening address at the 8th National Congress of the Communist Party of China, September 15th, 1956. Quote, with victory, certain moods may grow within the party. Arrogance, the airs of a self-styled hero, inertia, and unwillingness to make progress. Love of pleasure and distaste for continued hard living. With victory, the people will be grateful to us and the bourgeoisie will come forward to flatter us. It has been proved that the enemy cannot conquer us by force of arms. However, the flattery of the bourgeoisie may conquer the weak-willed in our ranks. There may be some communists who were not conquered by enemies with guns and were worthy of the name of heroes for standing up to these enemies, but who cannot withstand sugar-coated bullets. They will be defeated by sugar-coated bullets. We must guard against such a situation. End quote. Report to the second plenary session of the 7th Central Committee of the Communist Party of China, March 5th, 1949. Quote, many things may become baggage, may become encumbrances, if we cling to them blindly and uncritically. Let us take some illustrations. Having made mistakes, you may feel that, come what may, you are saddled with them and so become dispirited. If you have not made mistakes, you may feel that you are free from error and so become conceited. Lack of achievement in work may breed pessimism and depression, while achievement may breed pride and arrogance. A comrade with a short record of struggle may shirk responsibility on this account, while a veteran may become opinionated because of his long record of struggle. Worker and peasant comrades, because of pride in their class of origin, may look down upon intellectuals, while intellectuals, because they have a certain amount of knowledge, may look down upon worker and peasant comrades. Any specialized skill may be capitalized on and so may lead to arrogance and contempt of others. Even one's age may become ground for conceit. The young, because they are bright and capable, may look down upon the old, and the old, because they are rich in experience, may look down upon the young. All such things become encumbrances or baggage. There is no critical awareness. End quote. Our study in the current situation, April 12, 1944. Quote, some comrades in the Army have become arrogant and high-handed in their behavior towards the soldiers, the people, the government, and the party, always blaming the comrades doing local work, but never themselves, always seeing their own achievements, but never their own shortcomings, and always welcoming flattery, but never criticism. The Army must endeavor to eradicate these faults. End quote. Get organized, November 29th, 1943. Quote, hard work is like a load placed before us, challenging us to shoulder it. Some loads are light, some heavy. Some people prefer the light to the heavy. They pick the light and shove the heavy onto others. That is not a good attitude. Some comrades are different. They leave ease and comfort to others and take the heavy loads themselves. They are the first to bear hardships, the last to enjoy comforts. They are good comrades. We should all learn from their communist spirit. End quote. On the Chungking negotiations, October 17th, 1945. Quote, there are not a few people who are irresponsible in their work, preferring the light to the heavy, shoving the heavy loads onto others, and choosing the easy ones for themselves. At every turn, they think of themselves before others. When they make some small contribution, they swell with pride and brag about it for fear that others will not know. They feel no warmth towards comrades and the people, but are cold, indifferent, and apathetic. In fact, such people are not communists, or at least cannot be counted as true communists. End quote. Memory of Norman Bethune, December 21st, 1939. Quote, those who assert this kind of independence are usually wedded to the doctrine of me first, and are generally wrong on the question of the relationship between the individual and the party. Although in words they profess respect for the party, in practice they put themselves first and the party second. Comrade Liu Shaoqi once said of certain people that they have unusually long arms and are very clever in looking after their own interests, but pay little heed to the interests of others and of the party as a whole. What's mine is mine, and what's yours is mine too. What are these people after? They are after fame and position, and want to be in the limelight. Whenever they are put in charge of a branch of work, they assert their, quote, independence. With this aim, they draw some people in, push others out, and resort to boasting, flattery, and touting among the comrades, thus importing the vulgar style of the bourgeoisie political parties into the Communist Party. It is their dishonesty that causes them to come to grief. I believe we should do things honestly, for without an honest attitude it is absolutely impossible to accomplish anything in this world. End quote. Rectify the party's style of work, February 1st, 1942. Quote, they, communists, must grasp the principle of subordinating the needs of the part to the needs of the whole. If a proposal appears feasible for a partial situation but not for the situation as a whole, then the part must give way to the whole. Conversely, if the proposal is not feasible for the part but is feasible in the light of the situation as a whole, again, the part must give way to the whole. This is what is meant by considering the situation as a whole. End quote. The role of the Chinese Communist Party in the National War, October 1938. Quote, pleasure seeking. In the Red Army, there are also quite a few people whose individualism finds expression in pleasure seeking. They always hope that their unit will march into big cities. They want to go there not to work, but to enjoy themselves. The last thing they want is to work in the red areas where life is hard. End quote. On correcting mistaken ideas in the party, December 1929. Quote, we must oppose the tendency towards selfish departmentalism, by which the interests of one's own unit are looked after to the exclusion of those of others. Whoever is indifferent to the difficulties of others refuses to transfer cadres to other units on request. or releases only the inferior ones, using the neighbor's field as an outlet for his overflow. It does not give the slightest consideration to other departments, localities, or people. Such a person is a selfish departmentalist who has entirely lost the spirit of communism. Lack of consideration for the whole and complete indifference to other departments, localities, and people are characteristics of a selfish departmentalist. We must intensify our efforts to educate such persons and to make them understand that selfish departmentalism is a sectarian tendency which will become very dangerous if allowed to develop. End quote. Rectify the party's style of work. February 1st, 1942. Quote, liberalism manifests itself in various ways. To let things slide for the sake of peace and friendship when a person has clearly gone wrong, and refrain from principled argument because he is an old acquaintance, a fellow townsman, a schoolmate, a close friend, a loved one, an old colleague or old subordinate, or to touch on the matter lightly instead of going into it thoroughly, so as to keep on good terms. The result is that both the organization and the individual are harmed. This is one type of liberalism. To indulge in irresponsible criticism in private instead of actively putting forward one's suggestions to the organization. To say nothing to people to their faces, but to gossip behind their backs, or to say nothing at a meeting but to gossip afterwards. To show no regard at all for the principles of collective life, but to follow one's own inclination. This is a second type. To let things drift if they do not affect one personally. To say as little as possible while knowing perfectly well what is wrong. To be worldly wise and play safe and seek only to avoid blame. This is a third type. Not to obey orders, but to give pride of place to one's own opinions. To demand special consideration from the organizations, but to reject its discipline. This is a fourth type. To indulge in personal attacks, pick quarrels, vent personal spite or seek revenge instead of entering into an argument and struggling against incorrect views for the sake of unity or progress, or getting the work done properly. This is a fifth type. To hear incorrect views without rebutting them, and even to hear counter-revolutionary remarks without reporting them, but instead to take them calmly as if nothing had happened. This is a sixth type. To be among the masses and fail to conduct propaganda and agitation, or speak at meetings or conduct investigations and inquiries among them, and instead to be indifferent to them and show no concern for their well-being, forgetting that one is a communist, and behaving as if one were an ordinary non-communist. This is a seventh type. To see someone harming the interests of the masses and yet not feel indignant, or dissuade or stop it, or reason with him, but to allow him to continue. This is an eighth type. To work half-heartedly without a definite plan or direction. To work perfunctorily and muddle along. So long as one remains a monk, one goes on tolling the bell. This is a ninth type. To regard oneself as having rendered great service to the revolution. To pride oneself on being a veteran. To disdain minor assignments while being quite unequal to major tasks. To be slipshod in work and slack in study. This is a 10th type. To be aware of one's own mistakes and yet make no attempt to correct them, taking a liberal attitude towards oneself. This is an 11th type. End quote. Combat Liberalism, September 7th, 1937. Quote, liberalism is extremely harmful in a revolutionary collective. It is a corrosive which eats away unity, undermines cohesion, causes apathy, and creates dissension. It robs the revolutionary ranks of compact organization and strict discipline, prevents policies from being carried through, and alienates the party organizations from the masses which the party leads. It is an extremely bad tendency. People who are liberals look upon the principles of Marxism as abstract dogma. They approve of Marxism, but are not prepared to practice it or to practice it in full. They are not prepared to replace their liberalism by Marxism. These people have their Marxism, but they have their liberalism as well. They talk Marxism but practice liberalism. They apply Marxism to others but liberalism to themselves. They keep both kinds of good in stock and find a use for each. This is how the minds of certain people work. The people's state protects the people. Only when the people have such a state can they educate and remold themselves by democratic methods on a countrywide scale, with everything taking part in and shake off the influence of domestic and foreign reactionaries, which is still very strong, will survive for a long time, and cannot be quickly destroyed. Rid themselves of the bad habits and ideas acquired in the old society, not allow themselves to be led astray by the reactionaries, and continue to advance towards a socialist and communist society. End quote. On the People's Democratic Dictatorship, June 30th, 1949. Quote, "It is not hard for one to do a bit of good. What is hard is to do good all one's life and never do anything bad. To act consistently in the interests of the broad masses, the young people in the revolution, and to engage in arduous struggle for decades on end. That is the hardest thing of all." End quote. Message of greetings on the 60th birthday of Comrade Wu Yu Chang, January 15th, 1940. Chapter 25. Unity. Quote, "The unification of our country, the unity of our people, and the unity of our various nationalities. These are the basic guarantees of the sure triumph of our cause." End quote. On the correct handling of contradictions among the people, February 27th, 1957. Quote, "It is only through the unity of the Communist Party that the unity of the whole class and the whole nation can be achieved. And it is only through the unity of the whole class and the whole nation that the enemy can be defeated and the national and democratic revolution accomplished." End quote. Win the masses in their millions for the anti-Japanese National United Front, May 7th, 1937. Quote, "We shall solidly unite all the forces of our party on democratic, centralist principles of organization and discipline. We shall unite with any comrade if he abides by the party's program, constitution, and decisions." End quote. On coalition government, April 24th, 1945. Quote, "This democratic method of resolving contradictions among the people was epitomized in 1942 in the formula unity, criticism, unity. To elaborate, it means starting from the desire for unity, resolving contradictions through criticism or struggle, and arriving at a new unity on a new basis. In our experience, this is the correct method of resolving contradictions among the people." End quote. On the correct handling of contradictions among the people, February 27th, 1957. Quote, "This, our Army, has achieved remarkable unity in its own ranks and with those outside its ranks. Internally, there is unity between officers and men, between the higher and lower ranks, and between military work, political work, and rear service work. And externally, there is unity between the Army and the people, between the Army and government organizations, and between our Army and the friendly armies. It is imperative to overcome anything that impairs this unity." End quote. On coalition government, April 24th, 1945. Chapter 26. Discipline. Quote, "Within the ranks of the people, democracy is correlative with centralism and freedom with discipline. They are the two opposites of a single entity, contradictory as well as united, and we should not one-sidedly emphasize one to the denial of the other. Within the ranks of the people, we cannot do without freedom, nor can we do without discipline. We cannot do without democracy, nor we can do without centralism. This unity of democracy and centralism, of freedom and discipline, constitutes our democratic centralism. Under this system, the people enjoy extensive democracy and freedom, but at the same time they have to keep within the bounds of socialist discipline." End quote. On the correct handling of contradictions among the people, February 27th, 1957. Quote, "We must affirm anew the discipline of the party. Namely, 1. The individual is subordinate to the organization. 2. The minority is subordinate to the majority. 3. The lower level is subordinate to the higher level. And 4. The entire membership is subordinate to the Central Committee. Whoever violates these articles of discipline disrupts party unity. End quote. The role of the Chinese Communist Party in the National War, October 1938. Quote, one requirement of party discipline is that the minority should submit to the majority. If the view of the minority has been rejected, it must support the decision passed by the majority. If necessary, it can bring up the matter for reconsideration at the next meeting. But apart from that, it must not act against the decision in any way. End quote. On correcting mistaken ideas in the party, December 1929. Quote, the 3 main rules of discipline are as follows. 1. Obey orders in all your actions. 2. Do not take a single needle or piece of thread from the masses. 3. Turn in everything captured. The 8 points for attention are as follows. 1. Speak politely. 2. Pay fairly for what you buy. 3. Return everything you borrow. 4. Pay for anything you damage. 5. Do not hit or swear at people. 6. Do not damage crops. 7. Do not take liberties with women. 8. Do not ill-treat captives. End quote. On the reissue of the 3 main rules of discipline and the 8 points for attention. Instruction of the General Headquarters of the Chinese People's Liberation Army. October 10th, 1947. Quote, they, all officers and soldiers of our army, must heighten their sense of discipline and resolutely carry out orders, carry out our policy, carry out the 3 main rules of discipline and the 8 points for attention. With army and people united, army and government united, officers and soldiers united, and the whole army united, and permit no breach of discipline. End quote. Manifesto of the Chinese People's Liberation Army, October 1947. Chapter 27. Criticism and Self-Criticism. Quote, the Communist Party does not fear criticism because we are Marxists. The truth is on our side, and the basic masses, the workers and peasants, are on our side. End quote. Speech at the Chinese Communist Party's National Conference on Propaganda Work, March 12, 1957. Quote, thoroughgoing materialists are fearless. We hope that all our fellow fighters will courageously shoulder their responsibilities and overcome all difficulties, fearing no setbacks or gibes, nor hesitating to criticize us communists and give us their suggestions. He who is not afraid of death by 1,000 cuts dares to unhorse the emperor. This is the indomitable spirit needed in our struggle to build socialism and communism. We have the Marxist-Leninist weapon of criticism and self-criticism. We can get rid of a bad style and keep the good. End quote. Report to the second plenary session of the 7th Central Committee of the Communist Party of China, March 5th, 1949. Quote, conscientious practice of self-criticism is still another hallmark distinguishing our party from all other political parties. As we say, dust will accumulate if a room is not cleaned regularly. Our faces will get dirty if they are not washed regularly. Our comrades' minds and our party's work may also collect dust, and also need sweeping and washing. The proverb, running water is never stale, and a door hinge is never worm-eaten, means that constant motion prevents the inroads of germs and other organisms. To check up regularly on our work, and in the process, develop a democratic style of work to fear neither criticism nor self-criticism, and to apply such good popular Chinese maxims as, say all you know and say it without reserve. Blame not the speaker, but be warned by his words. And correct mistakes if you have committed them, and guard against them if you have not. This is the only effective way to prevent all kinds of political dust and germs from contaminating the minds of our comrades and the body of our party. End quote. On coalition government, April 24th, 1945. Quote, opposition and struggle between ideas of different kinds constantly occur within the party. This is a reflection within the party of contradictions between classes and between the new and the old in society. If there were no contradictions in the party and no ideological struggles to resolve them, the party's life would come to an end. End quote. On contradiction, August 1937. Quote, we stand for active ideological struggle because it is the weapon for ensuring unity within the party and the revolutionary organizations in the interest of our fight. Every communist and revolutionary should take up this weapon. But liberalism rejects ideological struggle and stands for unprincipled peace, thus giving rise to a decadent, Philistine attitude and bringing about political degeneration in certain units and individuals in the party and the revolutionary organizations. End quote. Combat Liberalism, September 7th, 1937. Quote, in opposing subjectivism, sectarianism, and stereotyped party riding, we must have in mind two purposes. First, learn from past mistakes to avoid future ones. And second, cure the sickness to save the patient. The mistakes of the past must be exposed without sparing anyone's sensibilities. It is necessary to analyze and criticize what was bad in the past with a scientific attitude so that work in the future will be done more carefully and done better. This is what is meant by learn from past mistakes to avoid future ones. But our aim in exposing errors and criticizing shortcomings, like that of a doctor curing a sickness, is solely to save the patient and not to doctor him to death. A person with appendicitis is saved when the surgeon removes his appendix, so long as a person who has made mistakes does not hide his sickness for fear of treatment or persist in his mistakes until he's beyond cure. So long as he honestly and sincerely wishes to be cured and amend his ways, we should welcome him and cure his sickness so that he can become a good comrade. We can never succeed if we just let ourselves go and lash out at him. In treating an ideological or a political malady, one must never be rough and rash, but must adopt the approach of curing the sickness to save the patient, which is the only correct and effective method. End quote. Rectify the party's style of work, February 1st, 1942. Quote, another point that should be mentioned in connection with inter-party criticism is that some comrades ignore the major issues and confine their attention to minor points when they make their criticism. They do not understand that the main task of criticism is to point out political and organizational mistakes. As to personal shortcomings, unless they are related to political and organizational mistakes, there is no need to be overcritical, where the comrades concerned will be at a loss as to what to do. Moreover, once such criticism develops, there is the great danger that within the party, attention will be concentrated exclusively on minor faults, and everyone will become timid and overcautious and forget the party's political tasks. End quote. On correcting mistaken ideas in the party, December 1929. Quote, in inter-party criticism, guard against subjectivism, arbitrariness, and the vulgarization of criticism. Statements should be based on facts, and criticism should stress the political side. Inter-party criticism is a weapon for strengthening the party organization and increasing its fighting capacity. In the party organization of the Red Army, however, criticism is not always of this character, and sometimes turns into personal attack. As a result, it damages the party organization as well as individuals. This is a manifestation of petty bourgeoisie individualism. The method of correction is to help party members understand that the purpose of criticism is to increase the party's fighting capacity in order to achieve victory in the class struggle, and that it should not be used as a means of personal attack. If we have shortcomings, we are not afraid to have them pointed out and criticized, because we serve the people. Anyone, no matter who, may point out our shortcomings. If he is right, we will correct them. If what he proposes will benefit the people, we will act upon it. End quote. Serve the people, September 8th, 1944. Quote, as we Chinese communists, who base all our actions on the highest interests of the broadest masses of the Chinese people, and who are fully convinced of the justice of our cause, never balk at any personal sacrifice and are ready at all times to give our lives for the cause, can we be reluctant to discard any idea, viewpoint, opinion, or method which is not suited to the needs of the people? Can we be willing to allow political dust and germs to dirty our clean faces or eat into our healthy organisms? Countless revolutionary martyrs have laid down their lives in the interests of the people, and our hearts are filled with pain as we the living think of them. Can there be any personal interest, then, that we would not sacrifice, or any error that we would not discard? End quote. On Coalition Government, April 24th, 1945. Quote, we must not become complacent over any success. We should check our complacency and constantly criticize our shortcomings, just as we would wash our faces or sweep the floor every day to remove the dirt and keep them clean. End quote. Get organized. November 29th, 1943. Quote, as for criticism, do it in good time. Don't get into the habit of criticizing only after the event. End quote. On the question of agricultural cooperation, July 31st, 1955. Quote, taught by mistakes and setbacks, we have become wiser and handle our affairs better. It is hard for any political party or person to avoid mistakes, but we should make as few as possible. Once a mistake is made, we should correct it, and the more quickly and thoroughly, the better. End quote. On the People's Democratic Dictatorship, June 30th, 1949. Chapter 28. Communists. Quote, a communist should have a largeness of mind, and he should be staunch and active, looking upon the interests of the revolution as his very life, and subordinating his personal interests to those of the revolution. Always and everywhere, he should adhere to the principle and wage a tireless struggle against all incorrect ideas and actions, so as to consolidate the collective life of the party and strengthen the ties between the party and the masses. He should be more concerned about the party and the masses than about any individual, and more concerned about others than about himself. Only thus can he be considered a communist. End quote. Combat Liberalism, September 7th, 1937. Quote, every comrade must be brought to understand that the supreme test of the words and deeds of a communist is whether they conform with the highest interests and enjoy the support of the overwhelming majority of the people. End quote. On Coalition Government, April 24th, 1945. Quote, at no time and in no circumstances should a communist place his personal interests first. He should subordinate them to the interests of the nation and of the masses. Hence, selfishness, slacking, corruption, seeking the limelight, and so on are most contemptible, while selflessness, working with all one's energy, wholehearted devotion to public duty, and quiet hard work will command respect. End quote. The role of the Chinese Communist Party in the National War, October 1938. Quote, communists must be ready at all times to stand up for the truth, because truth is in the interests of the people. Communists must be ready at all times to correct their mistakes, because mistakes are against the interests of the people. End quote. On Coalition Government, April 24th, 1945. Quote, communists must always go into the whys and wherefores of anything, use their own heads, and carefully think over whether or not it corresponds to reality and is really well founded. On no account should they follow blindly and encourage slavishness. End quote. Rectify the party's style of work, February 1st, 1942. Quote, we should encourage comrades to take the interests of the whole into account. Every party member, every branch of work, every statement, and every action must proceed from the interests of the whole party. It is absolutely impermissible to violate this principle. Communists should set an example in being practical as well as far-sighted, for only by being practical can they fulfill the appointed tasks, and only far-sightedness can prevent them from losing their bearings in the march forward. End quote. The role of the Chinese Communist Party in the National War, October 1938. Quote, communists should be the most far-sighted, the most self-sacrificing, the most resolute, and the least prejudiced in sizing up situations, and should rely on the majority of the masses and win their support. End quote. The tasks of the Chinese Communist Party in the period of resistance to Japan, May 3rd, 1937. Quote, communists should set an example in study. At all times, they should be pupils of the masses as well as their teachers. End quote. The role of the Chinese Communist Party in the National War, October 1938. Quote, every communist working in the mass movements should be a friend of the masses and not a boss over them, an indefatigable teacher and not a bureaucratic politician. Communists must never separate themselves from the majority of the people or neglect them by leading only a few progressive contingents in an isolated and rash advance, but must take care to forge close links between the progressive elements and the broad masses. This is what is meant by thinking in terms of the majority. We communists are like seeds, and the people are like the soil. Wherever we go, we must unite with the people, take root, and blossom among them. End quote. On the Chungking negotiations, October 17, 1945. Quote, we communists must be able to integrate ourselves with the masses in all things. If our party members spend their whole lives sitting indoors and never go out to face the world and brave the storm, what good will they be to the Chinese people? None at all, and we do not need such people as party members. We communists ought to face the world and brave the storm, the great world of mass struggle and the mighty storm of mass struggle. End quote. Get organized, November 29th, 1943. Quote, the exemplary vanguard role of the communists is of vital importance. Communists in the 8th Route and new 4th Armies should set an example in fighting bravely, carrying out orders, observing discipline, doing political work, and fostering internal unity and solidarity. End quote. The role of the Chinese Communist Party in the National War, October 1938. Quote, a communist must never be opinionated or domineering, thinking that he is good in everything while others are good in nothing. He must never shut himself up in his little room, or brag and boast and lord it over others. End quote. Speech at the Assembly of Representatives of the Shenxi Kansu-Nizha Border Region, November 21st, 1941. Quote, communists must never listen attentively to the views of people outside the party and let them have their say. If what they say is right, we ought to welcome it, and we should learn from their strong points. If it is wrong, we should let them finish what they are saying and then patiently explain things to them. The attitude of communists towards any person who has made mistakes in his work should be one of persuasion, in order to help him change and start afresh, and not one of exclusion, unless he is incorrigible. End quote. The role of the Chinese Communist Party in the National War, October 1938. Quote, as for people who are politically backward, communists should not slight or despise them, but should befriend them, unite with them, convince them, and encourage them to go forward. End quote. If you'd like to contribute or learn more about our party, visit www.t.me/CPMAOIST. Chapter 29. Cadres. Quote, in order to guarantee that our party and country do not change their color, we must not only have a correct line and correct policies, but must train and bring up millions of successors who will carry on the cause of proletarian revolution. In the final analysis, the question of training successors for the revolutionary cause of the proletariat is one of whether or not there will be people who can carry on the Marxist-Leninist revolutionary cause started by the older generation of proletarian revolutionaries. Whether or not the leadership of our party and state will remain in the hands of proletarian revolutionaries. Whether or not our descendants will continue to march along the correct road laid down by Marxism-Leninism. Or, in other words, whether or not we can successfully prevent the emergence of Khrushchev's revisionism in China. In short, it is an extremely important question, a matter of life and death for our party and our country. It is a question of fundamental importance to the proletarian revolutionary cause for 100, 1,000, nay, 10,000 years. Basing themselves on the changes in the Soviet Union, the imperialist prophets are pinning their hopes of peaceful evolution on the 3rd or 4th generation of the Chinese party. We must shatter these imperialist prophecies. From our highest organizations down to the grassroots, we must everywhere give constant attention to the training and upbringing of successors to the revolutionary cause. What are the requirements for worthy successors to the revolutionary cause of the proletariat? They must be genuine Marxist-Leninists and not revisionists like Khrushchev wearing the cloak of Marxism-Leninism. They must be revolutionaries who wholeheartedly serve the overwhelming majority of the people of China and the whole world, and must not be like Khrushchev, who serves both the interests of a handful of members of the privileged bourgeoisie stratum in his own country and those of foreign imperialism in reaction. They must be proletarian statesmen, capable of uniting and working together with the overwhelming majority. Not only must they unite with those who agree with them, they must also be good at uniting with those who disagree, and even with those who formally oppose them and have since been proved wrong in practice. But they must especially watch out for careerists and conspirators like Khrushchev, and prevent such bad elements from usurping the leadership of the party and the state at any level. They must be models in applying the party's democratic centralism, must master the method of leadership based on the principle of from the masses to the masses, and must cultivate a democratic style and be good at listening to the masses. They must be despotic like Khrushchev and violate the party's democratic centralism, make surprise attacks on comrades, or act arbitrarily and dictatorily. They must be modest and prudent, and guard against arrogance and impetuosity. They must be imbued with the spirit of self-criticism and have the courage to correct mistakes and shortcomings in their work. They must never cover up their errors like Khrushchev, and claim all the credit for themselves and shift all the blame on others. Successors to the revolutionary cause of the proletariat come forward in mass struggles and are tempered in the great storms of revolution. It is essential to test and judge cadres and choose and train successors in the long course of mass struggle. End quote. Quoted in On Khrushchev's Phony Communism and Its Historical Lessons for the World, July 14th, 1964. Quote, our party organizations must be extended all over the country, and we must purposefully train tens of thousands of cadres and hundreds of first-rate leaders. They must be cadres and leaders versed in Marxism-Leninism, politically far-sighted, competent in work, full of the spirit of self-sacrifice, capable of tackling problems on their own, steadfast in the midst of difficulties, and loyal and devoted in serving the nation, the class, and the party. It is on these cadres and leaders that the party relies for its links with the membership and the masses, and it is by relying on their firm leadership of the masses that the party can succeed in defeating the enemy. Such cadres and leaders must be free from selfishness, from individualistic heroism, ostentation, sloth, passivity, and arrogant sectarianism, and they must be selfless, national, and class heroes. Such are the qualities and the style of work demanded of the members, cadres, and leaders of our party. End quote. Win the masses in their millions for the anti-Japanese National United Front. May 7th, 1937. Quote, cadres are a decisive factor once the political line is determined. Therefore, it is our fighting task to train large numbers of new cadres in a planned way. End quote. The role of the Chinese Communist Party in a national war. October 1938. Quote, the criterion the Communist Party should apply in its cadres policy is whether or not a cadre is resolute in carrying out the party line, keeps to party discipline, has close ties with the masses, has the ability to find his bearings independently, and is active, hardworking, and unselfish. This is what appointing people on their merit means. It is necessary to maintain the system of cadre participation in collective productive labor. The cadres of our party and state are ordinary workers, and not overlords sitting on the backs of the people. By taking part in collective productive labor, the cadres maintain extensive, constant, and close ties with the working people. This is a major measure of fundamental importance for a socialist system. It helps to overcome bureaucracy and to prevent revisionism and dogmatism. End quote. Quoted in On Khrushchev's Phony Communism and the Historical Lessons for the World, July 14th, 1964. Quote, we must know how to judge cadres. We must not confine our judgment to a short period or a single incident in a cadre's life, but should consider his life and work as a whole. This is the principal method of judging cadres. End quote. The role of the Chinese Communist Party in the National War, October 1938. Quote, we must know how to use cadres well. In the final analysis, leadership involves two main responsibilities: to work out ideas and to use cadres well. Such things as drawing up plans, making decisions, and giving orders and directives are all in the category of working out ideas. To put the ideas into practice, we must weld the cadres together and encourage them to go into action. This comes into the category of using the cadres well. We must know how to take good care of cadres. There are several ways of doing so. First, give them guidance. This means allowing them a free hand in their work so that they have the courage to assume responsibility and at the same time, giving them timely instructions so that, guided by the party's political line, they are able to make full use of their initiative. Second, raise their level. This means educating them by giving them the opportunity to study so that they can enhance their theoretical understanding and their working ability. Third, check up on their work and help them sum up their experience. Carry forward their achievements and correct their mistakes. To assign work without checking up and to take notice only when serious mistakes are made. That is not the way to take care of cadres. Fourth, in general, use the method of persuasion with cadres who have made mistakes and help them correct their mistakes. The method of struggle should be confined to those who make serious mistakes and nevertheless refuse to accept guidance. Here, patience is essential. It is wrong lightly to label people opportunists, or lightly to begin waging struggles against them. Fifth, help them with their difficulties. When cadres are in difficulty as a result of illness, straitened means, or domestic or other troubles, we must be sure to give them as much care as possible. This is how to take good care of cadres. A leading group that is genuinely united and is linked with the masses can gradually be formed only in the process of mass struggle, and not in isolation from it. And the process of the leading group in most cases should not and cannot remain entirely unchanged throughout the initial, middle, and final stages. The activists who come forward in the course of the struggle must constantly be promoted to replace those original members of the leading group who are inferior by comparison or have degenerated. End quote. Some questions concerning methods of leadership. June 1st, 1943. Quote, if our party does not have a great many new cadres working in unity and cooperation with the old cadres, our cause will come to a stop. All old cadres, therefore, should welcome the new ones with the utmost enthusiasm and show them the warmest solicitude. True, new cadres have their shortcomings. They have not been long in the revolution and lack experience, and unavoidably, some have brought with them vestiges of the unwholesome ideology of the old society, remnants of the ideology of petty bourgeoisie individualism. But such shortcomings can be gradually eliminated through education and tempering in the revolution. The strong point of the new cadres, as Stalin has said, is that they are acutely sensitive to what is new, and are therefore enthusiastic and active to a high degree, the very qualities which some of the old cadres lack. Cadres, new and old, should respect each other, learn from each other, and overcome their own shortcomings by learning from each other's strong points, so as to unite as one in the common cause and guard against sectarian tendencies. End quote. Rectify the party's style of work. February 1st, 1942. Quote, our concern should extend to non-party cadres as well as to party cadres. There are many capable people outside the party whom we must not ignore. The duty of every communist is to rid himself of aloofness and arrogance, and to work well with non-party cadres, give them sincere help, have a warm, comradely attitude towards them, and enlist their initiative in the great cause of resisting Japan and reconstructing the nation. End quote. The role of the Chinese Communist Party in the National War, October 1938. Chapter 30. Youth. Quote, the world is yours, as well as ours. But in the last analysis, it is yours. You young people, full of vigor and vitality, are in the bloom of life. Like the sun at 8 or 9 in the morning, our hope is placed on you. The world belongs to you. China's future belongs to you. End quote. Talk at a meeting with Chinese students and trainees in Moscow, November 17, 1957. Quote, we must help all our young people to understand that ours is still a very poor country, that we cannot change this situation radically in a short time, and that only through the united efforts of our younger generation and all our people, working with their own hands, can China be made strong and prosperous within a period of several decades. The establishment of our socialist system has opened the road leading to the ideal society of the future. But to translate this ideal into reality needs hard work. End quote. On the correct handling of contradictions among the people. February 27, 1957. Quote, Because of their lack of political and social experience, quite a number of young people are unable to see the contrast between the old China and the new, and it is not easy for them thoroughly to comprehend the hardships our people went through and the struggle to free themselves from the oppression of the imperialists and Kuomintang reactionaries, or the long period of arduous work needed before a happy socialist society can be established. That is why we must constantly carry on lively and effective political education among the masses, and should always tell them the truth about the difficulties that crop up and discuss with them how to surmount these difficulties. The young people are the most active and vital force in society. They are the most eager to learn and the least conservative in their thinking. This is especially so in the era of socialism. We hope that the local party organizations in various places will help and work with the Youth League organizations and go into the question of bringing into full play the energy of our youth in particular. The party organizations should not treat them in the same way as everybody else and ignore their special characteristics. Of course, the young people should learn from the old and other adults and should strive as much as possible to engage in all sorts of useful activities with their agreement. End quote. Introductory note to a Youth Shock Brigade of the No. 9 Agricultural Producers, Cooperative in Sinping Township, Chongsheng County, 1955. Quote, how should we judge whether a youth is a revolutionary? How can we tell? There can only be one criterion, namely, whether or not he is willing to integrate himself with the broad masses of workers and peasants and does so in practice. If he is willing to do so, and actually does so, he is a revolutionary. Otherwise, he is a non-revolutionary or a counter-revolutionary. If today he integrates himself with the masses of workers and peasants, then today he is a revolutionary. If tomorrow he ceases to do so or turns around to oppress the common people, then he becomes a non-revolutionary or a counter-revolutionary. End quote. The orientation of the youth movement, May 4th, 1939. Quote, the intellectuals often tend to be subjective and individualistic, impractical in their thinking and irresolute in action until they have thrown themselves heart and soul into mass revolutionary struggles, or made up their minds to serve the interests of the masses and become one with them. Hence, although the mass of revolutionary intellectuals in China can play a vanguard role or serve as a link with the masses, not all of them will remain revolutionaries to the end. Some will drop out of the revolutionary ranks at critical moments and become passive, while a few may even become enemies of the revolution. The intellectuals can overcome their shortcomings only in mass struggles over a long period. End quote. The Chinese Revolution and the Chinese Communist Party, December 1939. Quote, apart from continuing to act in coordination with the party in its central task, the Youth League should do its own work to suit the special characteristics of youth. New China must care for her youth and show concern for the growth of the younger generation. Young people have to study and work, but they are at the age of physical growth. Therefore, full attention must be paid both to their work and study and to their recreation, sport, and rest. End quote. Talk at the reception for the Presidium of the Second National Congress of the Youth League, June 30th, 1953. Chapter 31. Women. Quote, a man in China is usually subjected to the domination of three systems of authority: political authority, clan authority, and religious authority. As for women, in addition to being dominated by these three systems of authority, they are also dominated by the men, the authority of the husband. These four authorities, political, clan, religious, and masculine, are the embodiment of the whole feudal patriarchal ideology and system, and are the four thick ropes binding the Chinese people, particularly the peasants. How the peasants have overthrown the political authority of the landlords in the countryside has been described above. The political authority of the landlords is the backbone of all the other systems of authority. With that overturned, the clan authority, the religious authority, and the authority of the husband all begin to totter. As to the authority of the husband, this has always been weaker among the poor peasants because, out of economic necessity, their women folk have to do more manual labor than the women of the richer classes, and therefore have more say and greater power of decision in family matters. With the increasing bankruptcy of the rural economy in recent years, the basis for men's domination over women has already been undermined. With the rise of the peasant movement, the women in many places have now begun to organize rural women's associations. The opportunity has come for them to lift up their heads, and the authority of the husband is getting shakier every day. In a word, the whole feudal patriarchal ideology and system is tottering with the growth of the peasant's power. End quote. Report on an investigation of the peasant movement in Hunan, March 1927. Quote, unite and take part in production and political activity to improve the economic and political status